The invasion of Ukraine by Russia is straight out of the 19th-century playbook. Could Ukraine win the war? How will the war end? What would a de-escalation or an end to the war look like? And what would it mean for the two countries? There are a lot of questions to be answered, but have y'all wondered how long it'll take for Ukraine to rebuild the country after the Russian invasion? Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we'll go through some steps that Ukraine to take to build back better post-war. A wealthy nation marches into a smaller, weaker neighbor in order to grow its own territory and resources while imposing its own policy. Ukraine is an extremely valuable asset with abundant natural resources, a robust agricultural sector, and of course, human capital. There are a lot of bleak prospects for the future. However, there is a potential that a deal may be made that'll result in an independent Ukraine with democratically chosen authorities. It is evident that Russia is up against strong opposition.
Украина будет в НАТО и военным путем будет возвращать себе Крым, европейские страны автоматически будут втянуты в военный конфликт с Россией.
And some observers, such as Elliot A. Cohen, have predicted that Putin will lose. While it's tough to talk about recovery while civilians are still being attacked, hospitals are being bombed, and cities are without power or water, thinking about recovery implies imagining a post-conflict future, which connects to the twin messages of hope and the need to keep fighting. Although the invasion and conflict followed a 20th century narrative, efficient recovery is a 21st century ability. This invasion has caused a real tragedy, with its increasingly indiscriminate targeting of physical, environmental, and human infrastructure. Although this is a man-made disaster involving conflict rather than a natural disaster involving weather or earthquakes, some of the principles still apply. If the Ukrainian resistance succeeds in keeping Ukraine's independence, President Zelensky will have to plot the country's future actions. Disasters teach us that the first stage is to respond. Prioritize assisting people in the immediate aftermath of a disaster by guaranteeing clean water, adequate power, and medical care for the sick and injured. This is the triage phase, and it entails doing all it takes to ensure that people are safe as possible. Recovery is the next move. But how do we rebuild broken Ukraine after the war? During the recovery phase, steps are taken to get people back to a normal life where they can live, go to school, and work. Many lessons can be learned from natural and man-made disasters around the world. There are fewer disasters that affect the entire economy. Given that the scope of the Russian attacks at this stage appears to be concentrated on destroying infrastructure and depopulating the country, these tragedies are more appropriate to relate to Ukraine's position. A visionary recovery plan can provide an integrated approach to recovery in a whole-of-economy crisis. One example is Puerto Rico's response to Hurricane Maria's devastation in 2017. Puerto Rico's government presented a congressionally mandated economic and catastrophe recovery plan that was unprecedented in the disaster recovery literature in terms of the breadth and extent of themes covered. Hurricane Maria wreaked havoc on the island, necessitating an all-island recovery plan. Recovery is always an option, with a number of methods to improve on what has gone before. Updated construction rules and green building approaches can help Ukraine become a pioneer in green energy by saving electricity and reducing water consumption. Analysis can aid in determining where the greatest places to invest in road reconstruction and advanced medical facilities are located. Have schools been demolished? Rebuild them using cutting-edge technologies in areas where students live. Reforesting and natural infrastructure should be prioritized. For water, power, and telecommunications lines, dig trenches near roads. The substantial physical and natural infrastructure damage inflicted by Russian assaults will necessitate extensive planning and investment in the hundreds of billions of dollars range. Russia appears to have engaged in a cost-imposing policy of tremendous damage at this point in the battle, with a clean win doubtful. Since Germany and Japan were the aggressor nations during World War II, the connection isn't perfect, but both countries recovered from a significant damage and created strong economies. Germany benefited greatly from the European Recovery Plan, popularly known as the Marshall Plan, and Japan got significant assistance. Ukraine will require a large sum of money to restore. These resources will not be generated from the economy at first, necessitating foreign aid, and the scope of the recovery will be vast, far exceeding what any single country can afford. Countries committed to guaranteeing Ukraine's long-term viability and maybe serving as a bulwark against Russia must contribute. Other investors may be wary about taking risks. These investments, however, will have a geopolitical purpose, conveying a message to adversaries that Western friends will stick together, and to other states that aligning with these allies has advantages. Lastly, Ukraine will need to address concerns about corruption and try to eradicate it in order to ensure that monies are spent as intended. Building confidence with funders will require transparency, as well as suitable indicators to deliver the message that funds are going to the intended purpose. The second problem is to generate support for the many million or more refugees who have fled to other countries in the hopes of returning home. Conflict-related forced relocation is typically more long-term than natural disaster-related forced displacement, which is typically more short-term. The longer people are gone, the more likely they are to start a new life, and the more difficult it is for them to return home. The majority of out-migration in Puerto Rico is due to economic concerns and possibilities in the 50 states rather than Hurricane Maria. Thus, getting people who have left to return will be difficult. Also, younger and healthier people find it simpler to move, resulting in an older, sicker, and overall poorer population following the disaster. Ukraine will face its own set of problems, including the widespread destruction of houses, schools, medical institutions, and workplaces. Last but not least, there's the issue of caring for those who have been physically and mentally harmed as a result of the Russian invasion. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a dreadful side effect of war, and the task of making the populace feel safe and secure in the face of an attack by their next-door neighbor is critical. Thousands of Ukrainians of all ages have died, leaving a large number of survivors in mourning. Such responsibilities may appear intimidating, but they are manageable to begin with, even if the ideal answers and full healing may never be achievable due to the large number of people who have lost loved ones. Building capacity to oversee and implement recovery should be part of Ukraine's work. In terms of communication, President Zelensky is unnatural. Recovery will rely heavily on developing a recovery mission and connecting with funders. The battle in Ukraine is still continuing at the time of recording this video, with no apparent end in sight. The heinous attacks seem to be going on indefinitely, and the images of the wreckage are sad. We can only hope that the worst is over and the violence will end soon, and that Ukraine will continue to exist as an independent and democratic country on the road to a successful national recovery. While Ukraine's leadership is rightfully focused on the battle, realizing that the next stage includes triage and planning for future recovery phases would better prepare Ukraine for that day. With this, we come to an end. Who's going to pay to rebuild the damage inflicted on infrastructure in Ukraine? Never mind the human cost. Is it possible that Ukraine may be able to win this war militarily? Do let us know in the comments section below. Subscribe for more content just like this one and share it with your friends. Also, don't forget to smash that like button and also press the bell icon to get notified about our new videos. Until then, fellas.